Part 3 Soldiers Diamond Boy Chapter 16 They came without warning. 4 helicopters appeared above the hills like huge metal locusts. The grey gunships swooped upon the diamond fields, rotors whipping up dust storms, guns firing upon the miners. Arvies and I were working together in one of the pits, and the sound of the machine guns, we dropped our tools and scrambled to the top of a mound, only to see one of the helicopters peeling away from Mafokorsi's and heading directly towards us. "Run, they're coming this way," shouted Arvies as we bounded down the mound. The helicopter bore down on Banda Hill, preceded by 2 lines of gunfire tearing up the earth. The noise was terrifying, the chaos immediate. A man nearby tried to collect his bags of ore, and a bullet went right through his head. Miners clambered out of their holes, scrambled over the fence, yelling, running in all directions. The helicopter hovered over Banda Hill, filling our eyes and ears with dust, machine guns blazing. In a blind panic, I staggered forward, falling over bodies and rolling down the side of a mound. Arvies grabbed my hand, the whites of his eyes showing, his mouth moving. Our screams unheard even to ourselves. In the roaring tempest we were trampled as fleeing miners dashed toward the main gate, desperate to escape. Chamba and Chippo were huddled by the fence. "Come on," I shouted, dragging Arvies to his feet. "Chippo! Chamba! Kamba. Kamba was trying to pull up a corner of the fence, his face strained with fear and effort. Chippo was on her belly, working her way under the wire. Arvies and I grabbed the fence, and together we were just able to lift it enough for Chippo to crawl through. "Go, go," I shouted as Kamba wriggled to the other side and held up the fence for us. Chippo was ahead, running towards Guejana Rock. In the distance, 2 helicopters hovered over Palmabada, their tracer bullets slamming into the hillside, ricocheting off the rocks. "Look!" shouted Kamba. Across the plain, soldiers on horseback herded a group of miners, firing rifles over their heads. Barking dogs ran alongside, snapping at the heels of those trying to escape. We sprinted towards our hill. We would be safe at Guejana Rock. But soldiers were everywhere, all around us, ear-crushing gunfire, barking dogs, whirling rotors, and screaming people. 2 jeeps came barreling down the banks of the Odzi River, heading straight for us. A man stood at the back of one, firing into the water. "We're almost there," cried Kamba. Another round of machine fire, closer now, crackled through the air. Up ahead, the soldiers appeared at the top of our hill, spread 10 paces apart, marching steadily towards us and the mine. And behind us, the hovering helicopter spun slowly above Banda Hill. We were trapped. "What do we do?" Chippo cried. "Split up," shouted Arvies. "They can't catch all of us." "No," I cried, my heart pounding. "Stand still. It's too late." A miner heading up the hillside saw the soldiers and tried to hide between the rocks. Not far from him, a soldier casually raised his rifle and fired. The man's body jerked, spun around, and fell to the ground. "Don't move," I said. "Don't do anything." Fear is not one thing alone. It is the hardness of the ground we sat on, the pain in our arms after hours of holding our heads and our hands on our heads. It's the trembling of Kamba's shoulders and the smell of urine. It's the dry acid taste in my mouth from the pit of my stomach. It had not taken long for the soldiers to herd all of the miners back to Banda Hill and force us to sit on the ground in 3 lines. In front of me, Kamba was sobbing quietly. Behind, Arvies was humming, and Chippo had managed to pull her cap down, her head bent low. If there was anything to be grateful for, it was that the soldiers had not noticed she was a girl. Jamu had not come to the mines that day. He was nowhere to be seen. In the chaos, I had not seen my father. He must have escaped. Perhaps he was hiding in the hills, or had gone back to the sheds to look after Grace. I was so afraid my stomach hurt. Some time later, 2 army trucks bounced over the veldt, bringing even more soldiers. One by one, in full battle fatigue, heavy black boots, gun-grey rifles, they jumped down from the truck, and it seemed that the earth shook with them. They strolled through the mine, paying us no attention. They smoked, talked in loud voices, the ever-present rifles slung carelessly on their backs. "I need to pee," I said loudly, trying to catch the attention of one of the soldiers. He ignored me. "Just do it," whispered Arvies behind me. "You'll dry quickly." I shuffled away from where I wet the ground. Later, some miners were pulled from the line to roll barbed wire around Banda Hill, and soon there were 2 fences around the mine. Others were ordered to dig holes for the posts of large tents. Over the course of the day, an army camp grew around us, with tables and chairs, boxes of ammunition, food, water, and kitchen supplies, all offloaded from the trucks by miners. While they worked on building the camp, the soldiers strolled through the mine, scuffing the ground and inspecting our tools. We watched silently as the army took possession of Banda Hill. Where was Uncle James, I wondered. Another jeep pulled up and skidded to a stop at the entrance. The driver jumped out, opened the door, and stood at attention for the passenger. From where I sat, all I could see was a pair of military boots resting on the dashboard. Then the owner of the boots sprang out the vehicle and strode purposely towards us. He wore a red beret and silver sunglasses. Attached to his black belt was a knife sheath, and strapped around his leg was a revolver in a leather holster. His mouth was a hard line of power and distaste. Soldiers stamped out their cigarettes, hitched their rifles, and stiffened as he approached. "Here comes the big cheese," whispered Arvies, full of himself, ripe and smelly. "Shut up, Arvies," hissed Chippo. The soldier in the red beret stopped before the huddled miners. Slowly he looked up and down our lines, his smooth, jet-black face a grim mask. "I am Commander Jesus," he said, his voice rising above the noise of the camp. The miners erecting the tents and unloading crates were ordered to stop working and join us. They scurried back and were pushed to the ground. All eyes were on Commander Jesus. "Who has a permit to mine here?" he demanded. Once there was silence. No one answered. "Permits!" he screamed. "Can any of you miner dogs show me a permit?" He scanned the lines of seated men shrinking before his glare. "Just as I thought. You have been stealing from the government, our government, the government of Zimbabwe. The president has sent me to recover what you have stolen. Today is the beginning of Operation No Return. There will be no more illegal mining in Marenge. There will be no more stealing from President Mugabe. This mine belongs to the people of Zimbabwe, not to miner dogs, criminals, and thieves." He turned to the driver. "Bring them," he ordered. A pair of soldiers moved to the back of the jeep and hauled out two men. I wriggled on my haunches to see over the heads of the men sitting in front of me. Uncle James and Moosey were thrown down in the dirt at Commander Jesus' feet. Uncle James's face was crusted in blood, and Moosey's hands were tied behind his back, and his head was lying at a strange angle. He seemed unconscious. Arvies whispered softly behind me. Now the pawpaws hit the fan. This is James Bunda. He and I have come to an arrangement," announced Commander Jesus. "Bunda Hill will now be called Mai Mujuru, after the wife of our glorious General Mujuru, who fought in the Liberation War to free the people of Zimbabwe from the white imperialists. Bunda has handed over all the state property that he illegally possessed." Commander Jesus pulled something from his pocket and held it up for all to see. It was Uncle James's small black velvet bag. "This is only a fraction of what this mine is capable of producing. Bunda knows who among you has stolen state property. Now would be a good time to give it back. Tell them, Bunda," he commanded. "As you can see, I have forgiven him, and I will forgive you too." Uncle James looked up, terror and confusion in his eyes. His face was twisted in agony. One of his eyes was puffed up and closed, his jaw seemed crooked, and blood seeped into his shirt. He stared blankly, trying to rise to his knees, but something seemed wrong with one of his legs. Moosey lay beside him, still not moving. "Commander Jesus is in charge of Bunda Hill, and," he croaked, "my Mujuru," Commander Jesus corrected. "Mujuru," repeated Uncle James. "We will be working together to pay back what we owe the government." His voice was hoarse and cracked. His words were difficult to hear. "Give him all the stones you have found." He collapsed, gripping his leg in pain. Arvies and I glanced at each other. "Do you think he knows about us?" whispered Kumba. "Shh," hissed Chippo, staring angrily at Kumba. "So who wants to be forgiven first?" asked Commander Jesus as he stepped over Uncle James and nodded to the soldiers. They stepped forward to grab Uncle James and Moosey, throwing them into the front line of cowering men. "I am waiting," Commander Jesus said, strolling amongst the miners, hands on his hips, head swiveling as he studied us through his reflective sunglasses. Men shuffled out of the way of his black, shiny army boots. He stopped close to where I was sitting and waited. Nobody moved, but I felt a tremor of fear rippling through the miners, smelt the stench of someone losing control of his bowels. Up ahead, Moosey groaned. "Enough, please," Uncle James choked. "We don't have any more. We gave them all to you." "I will wait no longer," Commander Jesus said when no one offered up any ngordas. Slowly he raised his hand, pointing a finger at a group of soldiers who immediately began barking instructions. More soldiers appeared from behind a tent, dragging two large branches hacked from a tree, branches thick with long white thorns. They lay them on the ground. Around me, miners started pleading, lifting their hands to Commander Jesus as if in prayer. Soldiers threw another large thorn branch onto the pile. From one of the trucks, soldiers produced thick sticks. "Keep your heads down," Arvies whispered. "Tell Kumba." Kumba's shaking intensified. "Don't let them take me, Patson," he pleaded, his face lined with tears. Commander Jesus gave the smallest of nods, and the soldiers fell upon the miners, pulling several to their feet and dragging them to the front and throwing them onto the pile of branches. Thorns as long as needles pierced their flesh. I dropped my head into my hands, trying to block out the screaming and the thud of wood against flesh, grateful that my father was not there. The night brought no relief. More trucks arrived, their headlights bouncing off military tents, lighting up razor wire in soldiers' faces. Miners from Mufakose and Palmabada jumped off the trucks and stumbled through the camp, herded by men with dogs. Many were injured, all were bewildered and frightened. Our group swelled as more miners joined the lines behind us. I tried to sleep, but every muscle ached. My mouth was dry, my body shuddering with every blast of rifle fire that echoed across the plains. Arvies lay with his head on his arm. He had not eaten all day and had missed his daily antiretroviral medication. By the time the sun had set, he had fallen into a deep sleep. He seemed to have shrunk, and his face was a peculiar shade of grey. Chippo was curled up with her hat pulled over her eyes, her back against Kumba's. I was jealous of their ability to sleep. I dozed to the sound of groaning around me, while fragments of conversation tugged me back from the borders of sleep. Thank the spirits I escaped. War zone out there. They killed us like flies. Biting dogs. Air Marshal Shiri ordered the helicopters. Fired tear gas into the holes, shot men as they came out. Bury those who died in the holes. Buried already. Bodies everywhere. The words jolted me awake. All day I had looked for my father's face in the lines of miners around me, watched for his tall figure amongst the men getting off the trucks. I had taken it as a good sign that he was not there, but now, in the middle of the night, I was not sure, and I needed to know. I crawled towards Uncle James and Moosey, slowly past sleeping bodies, stopping only to pretend to sleep when the guard looked in my direction. My father must have gone back to the farm. Perhaps Uncle James had a message for me. When I reached the sleeping Banda men, Uncle James was a messy heap on the ground, snoring through his broken nose, his face twitching every time he breathed. Moosey lay on his back, an arm thrown over his eyes. "Moosey," I whispered, shaking him awake. He jerked awake and stared at me through bleary, bloodshot eyes. "What do you want? My father. Have you seen my father?" He shook his head. "Leave me alone." "Moosey, were you at the farm? Did you see my father?" I shook him again. He sat up and glared at me. "The army's taken over Kodozi Farm. It's the new headquarters for Commander Jesus," he said bitterly. "My mother and Kuda are at the tobacco sheds." "And Grace?" "She's with Kuda and Jamu," he said. "Now leave me alone." "Uncle James," I whispered loudly. His eyes opened and he stared straight ahead. "Uncle James, it's Patson. Where is my father? Have you seen him?" I asked. He coughed and spat onto the ground. His shirt was caked with blood and he smelt of vomit. There was a large bruise on his chest and he flinched as he turned to me, struggling to focus. "Joseph Moyo, my father," I urged as loudly as I dared. "Patson?" He said, a wild look in his eyes. "You saw my Garazi, didn't you?" "Yes, Uncle James, I saw it." He gripped my wrist. "Commander Jesus has it, and now he's taken my mine. My Shavi has left me. My ancestors are angry. I have to ask for forgiveness. Uncle James, I'm worried about my father. Did he come back to the farmhouse? Is he with Grace?" "They've taken my house. My father, Uncle James. Have you seen him?" "I don't know. He's out there somewhere," he said, waving his hand vaguely in the direction of the hills. Chapter 17. My second Garazi came to me because of rain. It was our fourth day in the military camp, and there was still no sign of my father. I had to believe he had escaped, that he was not buried in a mass grave, that he was safe with Grace, working out a way to get me off the mine. I knew he would not leave me there. He had enough money to buy my freedom. Things had become very confusing. First, Commander Jesus had said we could not return to the mines, but 3 days later he changed his mind and said we would work together, soldiers and miners, for the good of Zimbabwe. If an Angodo or Garazi was found by a miner, he would receive payment from the army paymaster. "You need not run away from us," he had addressed the 100 captured miners. "Tell us how and where to find diamonds, and you will share equally in whatever we find." So we had worked for the Banda Syndicate, and now we'd be working for the army. Their words were hard to believe until they gave us plates of sadza and gravy and handed out bottled water and boxes of medical supplies. We ate their food, patched up our wounds, and stared blankly at our new masters. Mostly we were still in shock. One moment we'd been fired on by helicopters, the next we were in some weird partnership. Uncle James had never given his miners food or medicine, but then Uncle James had never kept his miners prisoner. "We are here to discuss a business proposition," Commander Jesus said on the fourth day, in the manner of a reasonable manager. "We want the names of diamond dealers. We know about the dealers at the dairy den, and those men who came from Mutari. We want their names." I glanced at Arvies, who shook his head. "We would never betray Bubakar or the Baron. If you give me a name, I will pay you with more food and money." With a smile as taut as razor wire, he added, "And now you will sing a Chimurenga song." Commander Jesus started singing, and his powerful voice stirred some of the miners seated in front of him. Others stared in stunned silence, but quickly joined in when the soldiers moved towards them. Soon we were all loudly singing the old liberation song. Mothers, don't be afraid to send your sons to war. Keep disillusion at bay. Keep fighting to have your say. These are the ways of the good revolutionary soldiers. Don't take riches from the masses. Return them to their rightful owners. Hide in the mountains to free Zimbabwe. When the song ended, I felt strangely rejuvenated. I noticed that some of the other miners were smiling, as if they had forgotten where they were. Commander Jesus clapped his hands, slow and steady, exactly 4 times. Excellent. We shall sing every night after our work. It is good for the spirit. He nodded approvingly. Now you, boy miners, come here. I want to speak to you alone. None of us dared move. Kamba glanced over at me, and Chippo sat with her arms tightly folded across her chest. Come, don't be frightened. I won't hurt you, Commander Jesus said with the warmth of a favorite uncle, but I felt the menace radiating from his mirrored sunglasses. A few boys stood and moved forward, and more followed. I shook Arvies awake, hoping that if Commander Jesus saw how ill he was, he might let him go home. What's up with the big cheese? Arvies asked weakly, coughing as he stumbled to his feet. He's the devil, Patson. Watch out for the man with no eyes. Can you keep your big mouth shut for once, Arvies? I whispered, squeezing his arm tightly. He flinched. I had forgotten how thin he was. At the front of the line, a trembling Kamba slipped in front of Chippo, blocking her from Commander Jesus' view. Chippo kept her head down. I could not bear to think what was in store if even one soldier saw she was a girl. So you are the boy miners of Marangia, Commander Jesus said. Up close, he was cleanly shaven, his face hard and angular. There was something hypnotic about the glint of his sunglasses, and I could not keep my eyes off the image they reflected, a ragged group of mud-spattered boys staring stupidly at him. James Bunger says your hands and eyes are quicker than those of any man on this mine. Would you like to work for me? I will teach you boys about the meaning of community service and give you lessons in patriotism. Bring them more food, he ordered the boys. He ordered the soldiers. Leaning towards us, his voice became low and smooth. You will now be my eyes and ears on my mujuru. If you bring me stones, I will give you lots and lots of money. If you tell me who takes what does not belong to them, I will give you even more. People shouldn't steal from the state. It's not only dishonest, it's unpatriotic. Do we understand each other? We listened intently. A few heads nodded. Arsehole, said Arvies, and for a moment I thought Commander Jesus had heard him. His head jerked up. A black snake came to mind, and his head swiveled in our direction. You at the back. What's your name? He asked. All the boys turned around. Me? I squeaked. Yes, you. Patson, I said. Did you say something, Patson? No, sir, nothing, sir. What's wrong with that boy next to you? I got diarrhea eating your shitty food, Arvies said loudly. There were gasps as everyone turned to see the reaction. Commander Jesus choked 3 short laughs, but he was actually laughing. Give that boy some Imodium, he ordered. Still smiling, he said, I'll look after you boys if you'll look after me. Commander Jesus does not hurt children. You are our country's future. I felt his gaze locked directly on me, and I realized no matter what he said, my situation was now worse than ever before. Commander Jesus knew who I was. The following day, all the miners were ordered to return to the pits, and nobody was allowed to leave the camp. The soldiers silently patrolled the perimeter of the field and walked through the mines, their rifles slung low over their backs. But several soldiers could be seen digging holes beyond the perimeter of the mine. They would never find diamonds in such shallow holes. No wonder Commander Jesus wanted us to keep working. We worked harder than usual, with no breaks, no talking, just lifting heavy ore sacks and back-breaking sieving. At the end of the day, we returned to the tents, but before we got our food, all the boys had to report to Commander Jesus. He asked each of us what we had seen, who had found Ngodas, and where we had worked. Once he was satisfied, we were separated from the old miners and given the same food that was served to the soldiers, a pile of sadza with meat stew and vegetables. Good food, and it didn't take us long to clean our plates. Arvies was feeling a little better, but still could not work a full day. He was now 5 days without his medication, and although he did not say anything, I knew his situation was serious. His face remained grey, dark rings grew under his eyes, and he could barely lift a half-full sieve. The sky remained empty except for the large black clouds which rolled over the faraway Bavumba Mountains, gathering strength above Marangia. Each day had been marked by rounds of gunshots from the nearby hills. But no one looked up from their work anymore. I heard men talking about it late at night. The soldiers were hunting down more miners, capturing them to work the fields and killing those who tried to escape. At Chadswa Dam there were bodies everywhere, one man said darkly. The soldiers made us dig a grave. We put 72 bodies into that one hole. Do you know who they were? Asked another. I'm missing my brother's son. I didn't know any of them, he replied, and spoke about military camps similar to this one, which had been set up at Palmabada. The eye of Mafukosa's Munda had been filled in to cover the bodies of the deceased. There was talk of a torture camp behind the hills for those who refused to support President Mugabe. The men only shook their heads, none talked about running away. Every day I worked at the far end of the mine where I had a clear view of the entrance. My father was too clever to be shot by soldiers. He would have escaped, and he would come for me. But at night, when the camp was quiet, I lay on my back and wanted to weep. Chippo and Kumba were planning an escape, but I knew I had to stay and wait for my father. Also, I would not leave Arvi's. He slept most of the day, curled up with stomach cramps. The blisters on his tongue made it difficult to eat, and he was growing weaker. I had promised I would fetch his medication as soon as possible. It looks like rain this afternoon, Chippo whispered to me as we walked close to one another in the shallow water. Kumba and I are going tonight. They won't waste bullets on kids trying to escape, said Kumba in a low voice, and the rain will help us. Chippo nodded. It's too dangerous for me here, Patchen, she said. I've seen the soldiers looking at me. I've got to get out. And living in my boring village doesn't seem like such a bad idea anymore, murmured Kamba. I don't want to leave. I want to leave with you, but then I have to come back, I said. I need to see if Grace and my father are at the sheds. I also have to get Arvi's medication from his grandmother at the school. It was decided later that night we would slip under the razor wire behind the drop toilets. For better or worse, we returned to our work, the heavy boots and automatic rifles of the patrolling soldiers close by, oppressive and threatening. As often as we dared, we looked up at the darkening sky. In the afternoon, another truck arrived and offloaded more men, but my father was not among them. When the grey sky was shot open by lightning, and the hills reverberated with the claps of thunder, rain fell in blinding sheets, and one by one the soldiers sought shelter under the tents. A few miners threw down their tools, only to pick them up again when rifles were pointed at them. The roar of the rainfall was deafening, the air turned into water. I lifted my face to the stinging downpour, cupped my hands before my mouth, and drank heaven's water. I had just started to fill my sieve again when I noticed a black rock sticking out from the riverbank. I picked up a shovel and started digging. The hard rain had loosened the earth around it, and the rock fell with a large plop into the water puddle at my feet. I groped blindly beneath the water, and it broke apart as I lifted it up. A garazi lay in my palm. It was the size of a dove's egg, and unlike my first garazi, smooth and clear. I plunged my fist back under water while my brain raced. What good had I done in my life to find two garazis? In what way did I deserve them, or was finding them pure chance? Either way, I knew I had to get my second garazi off the mine. Daringly, I wiped my muddy hands on my pants and slid the rain stone straight into my pocket. I carried on working, my mind spinning. My anger stone was bigger than this rainstone, but this one was as clear as the rain that had delivered it. A true garazi, at least 18 carats. I imagined Farouk Abdullah staring at it. What would he give me for this stone? The rain poured for the rest of the day. When we had finished our shift, we entered the tented area, soaked and shivering, and in the rush to get under cover, the soldiers did not search everyone as carefully as usual. It was easy to slip into the crush of adults heading for the hot food, and I carefully lost myself in the crowd. People were exhausted, too wet and hungry to pay much attention. After I had eaten, I ran back through the rain to the long drops. I slipped my pants down to my ankles, retrieved the rainstone, pulled the plug out of the sole of my right running shoe, and worked the stone into the secret cavity. My two garazis fitted snugly together like old friends. I returned to the tents, feeling Arvi's eyes on me as I took my place in the line for more food. After the singing, everyone settled down for the night, and I lay on my back listening to the raindrops on canvas, waiting for the signal from Kumba and Chippo, and dreaming about the diamonds in the sole of my right shoe. You shouldn't come back, whispered Arvi's next to me. There's no reason. You should run. Bad things are going to happen here. I can feel it. He pitched his voice low and looked me straight in the eyes. You've found your garazi, haven't you, Patson? I rolled over on my elbow, wondering how he knew. Arvies, I'm going to get your meds, check on Grace, and see if my father is at the sheds, I replied. But no matter what happens, I will come back. I'm not leaving you here. You've found one. This time I nodded. How big? I showed him my thumb, and he whistled softly. We can share it, Arvies, I said. He smiled the smile of a condemned man. I won't be around to drive any sports cars, Patson. I'll leave the high life to you. I could have said 100 things about staying hopeful and being positive, about praying to God and eating the right food, making offerings to his ancestors, but it would have sounded hollow. If Arvies was so honest about his own condition, how could I not be? That's not going to happen tomorrow, Arvies, or next month, or even next year. So we have plenty of time to spend some money, I said. He shrugged. Only if you can get it out of here. What's your plan? Not sure. You know, Patson, Arvid started carefully, your father's been missing a week now, and everyone is saying. His words crushed my heart. I heard Arvy's. About the mass graves, he's alive, I said louder than I meant to. I know he is, Arvy. He's with Grace. I'm just saying, we all heard what the soldiers did out there. My father's at the tobacco sheds, and I'll find out tonight, okay? I said, laying my hand on his arm. Any last instructions? Just don't let my granny scare you, and don't get her talking about your ancestors. She'll keep you there for hours. And remember, she lives in the photocopying room at the end of the corridor. My meds are in a little red tin underneath my mattress. Tell her I'm fine, and I'll bring her Chinese sweets soon. Chinese sweets? Fruity Pops. She hasn't got many teeth, but one of them is real sweet. She's obsessed, he answered, smiling. Then I noticed Cumber jerking his head in my direction. It was time to go. See you later, Arvies. I'll be back. Yeah, just like in the movies, he said. Chippo was already moving silently through the tent toward the toilets. Okay, Arvies, I'll see you tomorrow morning, I whispered, and walked out into the pouring rain. When I got to the toilet, I glanced over my shoulder. A soldier stood under the tarpaulin, looking in my direction. I opened the makeshift door to the corrugated lean-to, closed it, and crawled through a hole in the back where Cumber and Chippo were digging furiously. Come on, whispered Chippo as she scooped handfuls of mud from under the fence. Cumber slipped on a pair of oven gloves. Army chefs, he said with a grin, grabbing the razor wire and hauling it out the earth. Chippo wriggled into the channel she dug and carefully made her way under the wire. Once she was through, she knelt down and kept her eyes trained on the camp. Keep your back down, Patson, she whispered as I made my way under the fence after her. Cumber passed me the gloves and I pulled the razor wire while he wiggled through. For the first time in a week, we were outside the camp. We crouched in the mud, waiting for any sign that our escape had been noticed. The camp was quiet except for the rain pounding on the tents, beating out a rhythm on the toilet's iron roof. I slipped off the oven gloves and laid them next to the channel, held down with a rock. I would need them when I came back. Bye, Chippo. I'll see you around, Cumber, I said. They nodded to me, and we ran our separate ways, knowing the rain would cover our tracks, knowing that we would never see each other again. Chapter 18. The door to number 6 tobacco shed was ajar. The light bulb above the door flickered. The rain had stopped and all was quiet. I peered inside. Loud snoring came from the first mattress, and I recognized Priska's bulk. I slipped past Kuda, and there was Jammu sleeping next to his mother. Had he been there the whole time? I looked around. There was no sleeping body that looked like my father, or the wife for that matter. They must have put Grace in the back. With the last of its battery power, my cell phone created a dim blue halo in the darkness as I walked deeper into the shed. And there, in the darkest corner, where the damp tobacco smell was at its worst, I found my little sister asleep on the ground. The small things of her life, her toys, my father's briefcase, the book I had given him, were packed neatly around her as if guarding her from the world. She had no mattress, and was lying on a grass mat, with one of her soft toys as a pillow. Hanging above her was Bubakar's white tie. Crouching beside her, I gently stroked her arm. Grace, I whispered, wake up, it's Patson. Her Grace opened slowly. Patson, she said, where's Baba? The truth was inescapable and crushing. If my father was still alive, he would have come back for Grace. He's hiding from the soldiers, I said. She sat up and threw her arms around my neck. The soldiers beat Uncle James and Moosey and took them away. Auntie Priska said that the soldiers killed Baba. Is it true, Patson? Her voice trembled, and I hugged her back, pressing down my own urge to cry. Shh, we don't want to wake anybody. No, it's not true, but I came to tell you a secret, I said, gently taking her arms off my neck. You can't tell anyone. I glanced behind me. The shed remained quiet and dark. Grace, I found 2, I said, taking off my right shoe and slipping out the plug. I shone the light from my phone into the cavity. The rainstone twinkled white and blue. A diamond? Grace's voice rose. Shh! I quickly replaced the plug. 2 diamonds, Grace. But you mustn't tell anybody. Soon we'll go back to Bulawayo, or maybe Harare. Or South Africa, said Grace, her eyes bright. She pointed at a dress hanging from a hook. Look, my Girl Guide uniform. Determined says there's a jamboree. He wants to take us all to South Africa. Where did you get this? Determined bought it for me, she said, biting her bottom lip. I used some of Baba's money. She pulled his book from under her soft toy pillow. Not a lot. We're all going, Sidi and No Matter and Marka and me. I flicked through the pages of the book. Most of the money was still there. Quickly I counted out $30 and stuffed the rest deep into my pocket. How much did you give him? Just $20, Patson. Clearly Grace did not know the difference between American dollars and Zimbabwean. And he gave me a packet of sweets, she said, pulling out a bag of Fruity Pops. No matter what he says, don't give him any more money, okay? Do you understand? Okay, Patson, but we need money for the bus. No more money, Grace. I heard you, Patson. Have a sweetie. I took a handful and stuffed them in my other pocket. Then I pulled down Bubakar's lucky tie and slid the three $10 bills inside its widest part. Grace, there's over $1 billion Zim dollars in there. Promise me you will only use it in an emergency and that you won't tell anyone about it. Her eyes widened as I handed her back the tie. Do you promise? I promise, Patson. And look, I know how to use my phone. Didn't you get any of my WhatsApp messages? There's no reception on the mines, I said, pulling out my phone again and checking the screen. The low battery light blinked, but I had mail. Grace had sent a string of messages, and there were several from Sheena too. I turned back to Grace. Are they treating you okay? She dropped her head. I miss Baba, Patson. I don't like it here anymore. Grace, are they treating you okay? Auntie Priska's mean. She makes me work all the time, and she pinches me. She says I'm a nuisance. Kuda's kind, but she's afraid of Auntie Priska now that Uncle James is gone. Where's Sylvia? Grace rolled her eyes, then leaned forward. Auntie Sylvia was allowed to stay at the farmhouse, she whispered. When the soldiers moved in, she didn't come to the sheds. Kuda and Priska aren't very nice about her. I think they're jealous. Patson? I span around at the voice behind me. What are you doing here? Jamu asked. I've come to see Grace. I thought my father might be here. You don't know, he said. They didn't tell you. My father's hiding, I said, gripping his arm and pulling him away from my sister. Meet me outside. I'm coming now. I turned back to Grace. Grace, listen carefully. I have to go back to the mines for a while. But you've already found your I clapped my hand over her mouth. Don't tell anyone about that, I whispered sternly. It has to be our secret. I'll come back for you, and then we'll leave Merengue. Keep messaging me, okay? She nodded, and I saw tears brimming, but she hurriedly wiped them away. And that money in Bubakar's tie is for emergencies only, okay? You'll be fine. She nodded, her head on her chest. Can't I come with you? Not tonight, but it won't be long, I promise. I turned away before she could see my tears. Jamu was waiting for me outside. I was afraid he would wake up Priska and Kuda, so we walked a bit down the muddy path. The drenched earth sang with crickets and frogs. You're going back to the mines, Patson. Why? Arvies is sick. I have to take him his meds. I can't leave him there. What do you know about my father, Jamu? He shook his head. They say he was shot, Patson, on the first day. Who said that? My voice cracked. Moosey, he said he saw him fall. Later they took the bodies away in trucks and dug a mass grave. Have you told Grace? No, but I think my mother did. I'm so sorry, Patson. I wouldn't hear it. It's not true. Moosey said he hadn't seen my father. He was not on the mines the day the helicopters came. He's lying, Jamu. So many people died, Patson. Not my father, I said, staring intently at him. You understand, Jamu? Not my father. So what are you going to do now? Get Arvies' meds and go look for my father, and then I'll come back for Grace. We'll leave Merengue, I said, realizing how desperately I wanted to get away from this place. Arvies says you found a garazi. I shook my head. Arvies is wrong. You can tell me, Patson. I can help you sell it. I haven't found anything, Jamu. He did not believe me, but I had a burning question. How come you weren't on the mines the day the soldiers came, Jamu? He started, wasn't feeling well. Your father knew, I burst out, and you could have warned us. But I knew there was no point. I've got to go. Keep an eye on Grace. Don't let that warthog bully her. At least promise me that. Yeah, she's safe. Don't worry, he said. But about your garazi. I turned away and ran down the path. At Kodozi Farm, loud music blasted through the stillness of the night. 2 army jeeps were parked in the driveway and lights were on in the lounge. I don't know what made me do it, but I slipped through the fence and darted across the overgrown front lawn, looking out for any guards on the veranda. Once I had worked my way behind a large bougainvillea, I climbed up onto a ledge and peered through the window. The wife was dancing for Commander Jesus. She wore an unbuttoned army shirt, a pair of high heels, and a red bra that barely contained her breasts. She swayed from side to side, turning slowly in time with the music, sipping occasionally from a glass. Commander Jesus lay sprawled across the couch in shorts and a sleeveless white t-shirt, a bottle of whiskey between his legs, his eyes fixed on the wife. I was not surprised that the wife had found a way of looking after herself. My father must have known their marriage was over when she chose to stay at the farmhouse. The wife had replaced him for the favors of her brother, and now Uncle James had been replaced by Commander Jesus. It sickened me. I jumped off the ledge. My brain screamed at me to put down the large rock I found at my feet, but with all the force I could muster, I stepped back and hurled it through the window. Glass shattered. I did not hang around to see the effect on their party. I sprinted down the lawn and might have heard shouting, but it was quickly drowned out by gunfire shot blindly into the night. I ran through the veldt, long wet grass licking my legs, grimly satisfied with my gesture of defiance. When I was far away from Kodozi Farm, I checked my phone. So little battery, I'd have to be quick. I flicked through Grace's messages about life in the sheds and shot off a quick text to remind her to keep our secret. She pinged me back with an angelic smiley face and I grinned at her skills. Then I scrolled down to what I really wanted to read, Sheena's messages. You mean a lot to me too. Was worried you'd forget me. I miss you, not just our running, you. That afternoon was special. I liked it a lot. Smiley face, smiley face, smiley face. I never did that before. Will you ever come back to Milton? And are you there? We must talk. My dad talking about coming to get diamonds in Mirenge. Wants to bring the whole family. Make some dollars. We'll see you there. So excited. Diamonds for everyone. Smiley face. I stared at the night sky in disbelief. Did no one beyond the Bavumba Mountains know what the army had done here? Was it possible that they did not know? I scrolled to the next message. Can we talk? I want to know about your school, where you're staying, etc. Dad planning our trip. I'm coming only to look for only one diamond. You. Winky face. I could not believe what I was reading. With all that had happened in the last 10 days, I'd forgotten about the outside world, a world where life was safe, sane, and ordinary. I checked the dates of Sheena's messages. The last one was 3 days ago. No messages for 2 days could only mean that they were already travelling. I had not been honest with her about my life in Mirenge. I had lied about going to school and had made diamond mining sound like a game. If the Army's Operation No Return had been enforced in the whole Mirenge area, Sheena's family would be stopped on the highway. But what if they were dropped in the bush like we were? I had to warn her. They had to know the truth. Army taken over mine. Very dangerous. Tell your dad to go home. No school here. Do not walk through the bush. Soldiers everywhere. The low battery light blinked red. I pressed send and waited for the click of confirmation. The screen went black. My battery had died. Chapter 19. From the shadows I watched the soldier buckle his belt and saunter out of the classroom at Junction Gate High School. It had not taken long for the army to find the working woman from Harare, and night school was in session. I moved slowly through the shadows, cautiously keeping the soldier in my sight, heading towards the administration office. The front door was closed, but with a little pressure I forced it open. The foyer was dark and quiet, but I knew that behind each of the closed doors people had made homes in the offices. I walked quietly down the corridor towards where I guessed a photocopying room would be, and knocked softly once I found the door. "Mrs. Makupe," I whispered. "I'm a friend of Tendekai's." No response, but I thought I heard a faint sound of a metal plate being placed on a table. "Makoko," I whispered again. "My name is Patson. Tendekai sent me to get his medication." I knocked again a little louder. The door opened partially and a small figure stood in the crack of the doorway. She stared up at me. "Go away. It's late. There's no time," she said, closing the door. "Wait," I said. "Tendekai said you like fruity pops. I bought you some." The old woman hesitated. I could not see her face, but her hand darted out and took a sweet. When the door opened wider, I walked into a room that was unlike any school photocopying room I could have imagined. The room was dimly lit by several flickering candles. One stood burning upon a pile of rusted bolts, nails, and animal bones. The other appeared in the jaws of a black mamba. Another was on top of the school safe, impaled upon a quill of a porcupine, whose eyes twinkled in the candlelight. It took me a moment to realize that the eyes of the snake and the porcupine were made of glass, the work of a taxidermist. Against one wall was a set of shelves where reams of paper must once have been stored. Now it was filled with all the colours and textures of life itself, all apparently waiting to be bottled and bundled by RV's granny. A rainbow of remedies lined the shelves in different-sized jars, bundles of roots, piles of bulbs, heaps of sticks and bark, packs of bones and dried plant parcels, ready to be treated, scraped, boiled, and then swallowed or applied. In another corner above a mattress, the shimmering brown ribbon from old cassettes had been strung like a musical tangle of seaweed over the skull of a small animal. The room was permeated with the bitter scent of smouldering impepo, a field bush I knew was burnt by sangomas to appease the spirits. The contents of a black oil pot bubbled on a gas burner at the centre of the room, giving off an odious smell. The old woman slammed the door shut, studied me with a pair of pinprick black eyes set deep in her wrinkled face. I recognized her immediately. She was the liver-chopping crone we had met when my father came looking for Headmaster Ngoko. My stomach turned at the memory of her boiling liver and my father collapsing against the wall. I remembered Jamu talking about a powerful spirit medium that lived at Junction Gate, RV's grandmother. No wonder he had such easy access to marijuana. She had shelves of the stuff. And I was alone with her here in the dead of night. I would get RV's meds and leave as soon as I could. Tendakai is sick. He needs his medication, I said. This sickness, no good for anybody. Sit, sit. I know you. I've seen you before. Your father come here. Sit. I jumped at her command and sat down on a stool she patted with her hand. Then she leant over me, holding out her other hand. I fished around in my pocket and gave her all the fruity pops I had. These soldiers say I am a witch. Ha! Well, I'm sitting and suffering through the war of liberation. Years and years I work in the bush with the boys who fight the white men. I heal them. Dr. Mooti fixed them up. Ho! They say, you're casting spells. No way. I say, and yet all these problems, they're coming from greed. Your greed, I say. You kill the people of the soil. Why? For stones that shine? Ho, ho. She clicked her tongue and sucked her fruity pops, all while stirring her oil pot, tearing up bits of bark, grabbing stuff from the shelves, smelling, discarding, finding something else. "'Tis better if I grow a tree and hang myself. I die in shame. Forget everything of those days. Forget all the voices that visit me. When you hear suffering all night, all day, I'm these years old and I'm eating tears. I say, I want to be at peace, but you soldiers bring trouble. Well, my heart is angry." It was clear where Arvy's got his motor mouth. Then she turned and pointed a stick at me. "You, the Moyo boy. I remember now. Takai told me you found a Garazi. Ho ho, big trouble now. Bad and good together," she said, walking up to me and laying her hand upon my head. "But your totem is strong." Her fingers felt like the claws of a bird. I shifted uncomfortably. "Oh ho," she muttered, her voice now almost a whisper, and then as if her breath had suddenly been drawn from her, she went very still. I could not see her face, but felt the nails of her fingers lightly pressing into my skull. The candle on the pile of rusted bolts and nails sizzled, and its flame fluttered and died. A wisp of smoke twirled upward into the darkness. My chest tightened at the sudden change in atmosphere. "Your Shavi is strong, too. She watches. Shumba," she said, her voice clear now and somehow younger. "My half and half, my little lion. Now is the time to be strong." I went cold. The voice was so familiar. A tingling sensation rippled down my neck through the core of my body. Only one person had ever called me half and half, and little lion. "You must look to Grace," she said, her voice light, almost lyrical. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You need to have the heart of a lion." I wanted to reach out, to see my mother's face, but I was afraid that the moment would be broken, the sense of calm lost. The bird lightly released its grip as the old woman stepped back, exhaling forcefully, and drew a long, slow, shuddering breath. "Ho, ho," she exclaimed, turning back to her pot and shelves as if nothing had happened. "They come when I not ask. He, you lucky boy. Takai, he was brought up by me, not so lucky. Well, at first he stays with his mother and father. They die, I raise him. He was still a little child. I carry him on my back. He grows up. His uncle bring him here. I grow corn. I buy clothes for him, and I wash him. He grows so little. His uncle goes away. I send him to school, but the sickness, they do not want him. Indeed, he grew up here. He was raised by me, but he will leave soon. He will not grow any more. The doctor gives medicine. We both try. You came for this?" She handed me a red tin. Still dazed, I took it without a word. "Be careful, boy," she said. She laid her wrinkled hand gently on my arm and looked into my eyes. "These soldiers are dangerous. Tell Takai to come home. The camps are no good." I nodded, and then for no reason I could think of, I hugged her. Diamond Boy, Chapter 20. The third Garazi came to me because of a dream. My mother was sitting in the sun, carving a stick the shape of the letter Y. While she whittled, shavings flying from her blade, she sang a song that I had not heard since I was small. In the dream, the song was clear, her voice true and pure. "Pretty baby, where are you going? Come here, let's play. I'm going to the clouds, Mama, to sleep and dream with my friends." She sang the song over and over, occasionally looking at me and smiling. Once she was satisfied with her work, she lifted up the stick and planted it into the ground. I walked over and she took me by the hand. "What are you doing?" Amaya asked. "Watch, little Lionheart," was all she said. Green leaves started shooting from the stick, and a vine slowly curled around it as it grew into a baobab tree, which turned into a house, which became a building, which transformed into a gleaming skyscraper that soared through the clouds. I gazed in wonder at what had once been a simple Y-shaped stick, but was now a towering edifice, breathtaking and radiant. "This is all for you," she said. And then while I gazed up at the mighty building, she floated away. I did not mind her disappearing. The skyscraper's large doors swung open. Inside were many brightly lit rooms. I walked toward the entrance, exhilarated. Arvy shook me, and I woke up. "Hey, Patson, get up. Come on, wake up. Sorry I ate your breakfast," he said without much remorse, "but you didn't miss much. It was last night's suds fried up with tomatoes and onions. I took my meds as soon as I woke up, and man, did they make me hungry. I feel great. Why did you sleep with your shoes on, Patson? I like to let my toes breathe. You should take them off at least once a week. You might get fungy foot, and that really stinks." I groaned. "Arby, did anyone tell you that you sound exactly like your granny?" "As long as you don't think I look like her. I hope my gogo didn't give you a hard time. No, she probably did. Look, we gotta go." He hauled me to my feet, pointing at the soldiers herding miners onto the diamond fields. We were the only ones left in the tent, and it would not be long before we were noticed. "I've got so much to tell you," I said to Arvies. "Grace is fine. Jammy's been at the sheds the whole time. I think he knew the soldiers were coming. A lot happened here last night, too." "Oh?" "After the rain stopped, the soldiers went out to dig in the fields beyond the fence. Makes no sense to me." "Why would they dig for stones in the dark?" "Because they're stupid enough to think Karazi's float," he laughed, and I was amazed at how the contents of a small red tin had revived my friend's sense of humour. Then he went serious. He reached into his pocket and cautiously slipped me a shattered pair of glasses. "Moosey bought them last night. He came looking for you." There was no mistaking their familiar shape. I took the glasses from Arvy's, my hands trembling. "How did he get them? What did he say?" "He said I must give you your father's glasses." I had no words, no tears, only dull helplessness. All this time I had held on to the idea that I would somehow feel in my heart the moment of my father's death. I had blindly believed. Was I still such a child that I could not face the truth? Everyone had been talking about the miners who'd been shot trying to escape on the day the soldiers came, their bodies buried in mass graves. I was overwhelmed by the memory of him polishing these broken glasses, pushing them up his nose. If my father was dead, my Garazi dreams were worth nothing. "Come on, Patson," urged Arvy, shaking me gently. "We gotta go. The soldiers are coming. Don't think about it. Not now." He led me back onto the diamond fields of Merengue. All morning I laboured in the pits, tormented by my thoughts. The wife dancing for Commander Jesus while her husband was shot down. Did she care so little? Was she so heartless and cruel? I lashed at the earth with my pickaxe, blaming the wife with every blow. She had forced us to come to Merengue's. Diamonds for everyone, she'd said. If it weren't for her, he would still be alive. We would still be in Bulawayo. Grace and I would be going to school, and we would still have our father. The wife wanted, the wife got. To my father's death. I slashed and hacked away at the soil, tearing up the bank, and with my sorrow losing all sense of time and place. Baba was dead. I tried to imagine a future without him. My anger turned slowly to tears as I imagined him shot down, his body thrown into a mass grave, earth covering him without any ceremony to mark his passing. And then, as I tore into the earth, I saw the Y-shaped stick from my dream. I dropped my pickaxe, gripped the two ends of the root, and pulled as hard as I could. A part of the bank gave way, and the sky-blue Garazi sparkled in the sunlight. My Shavi must be my mother. Had I really heard her voice in the photocopying room last night? The old woman had called me Half and Half and Little Lion, Amai's pet names for me, and she had said I must look to Grace. It hardly seemed real this morning, but I was certain that I had carried my mother's spirit back to the camp with me, under the wire and into my dreams. But why today, Amai, on the day that I learned of Baba's death? What was my mother trying to tell me? Had she led me to this diamond so that I could take Grace away from here? With my father dead, I was the only one who could look after her. Now that I had 3 Garazis, I had to get Grace out of the sheds and away from Merengue. Quickly I pressed the stone back into the soil, tossing the roots aside. I glanced around and continued my work, thrust the pick into the ground, wiggle it free, pick up shovel, scrape ore into a pile, load sack, carry to sieve, the whole time making sure not to lose sight of where I had reburied the stone. I needed to calm down. I needed to think about getting the dream stone out of the mine. I needed to plan carefully, one step at a time, not let my tangled emotions get in the way. The Garazi might be small enough to slip inside my shoe, but with 3 in there, I would be sure to walk with a limp. It was too risky to keep it under my tongue, and I had no chewing gum to stick it inside my clothes. The sky-blue Garazi was so close, yet so far from being mine. I scanned the mines, looking for inspiration. Arvies was watching me, our eyes locked. I tilted my head, and he casually lifted a sack onto his small bony back and headed towards me. Then he crouched down and emptied his sack into my sieve. "Where?" he whispered. "A hand's width up from your right foot." I carefully watched the soldiers strolling along the mound directly above us. "How big?" "A large raisin, sky blue," I said. trying to sound as if we were talking about nothing more important than who would take the next break. He whistled softly. You've been a miner for 2 months, Petson, and you've found 2 Garazis. What do you have that all these other miners don't? I found 3 RVs. There didn't seem any point in lying now, and I don't know why. I feel the most amazing vomit coming on. You've got 2 seconds to get it out. Will that be enough? Yeah, but RVs. Then give it to me and help me back to the tent. Before I could say anything, Arvies had slipped his fingers down his throat and began retching. He groaned loudly, clutching his stomach as a plume of onion tomato vomit landed exactly where I had indicated. Arvies collapsed right on top of it. All eyes turned toward the vomiting boy. I reached down to help him, slipping my hand into the mud. The Garazi found its way into my palm. Arvies winked at me and then, never one to let an opportunity pass, he puked into my hands. He's sick, I called out to the nearest soldier. Help me, he's the HIV boy. The soldier winced. You get him out of here. I slipped the Garazi into Ivy's hand, and together we stumbled toward the soldier guarding the mine entrance. They patted me down, looked once at Arvies and the bits of salsa and tomato on his shirt and legs, and let him pass. Everyone knew about HIV and bodily fluids. When we got to our tent, I bought Arvies a basin of water, and he stripped off his shirt. Spectacular performance, eh? He grinned, rinsing out his mouth and splashing his face clean. There was no Garazi in either of his hands. Oscar-winning, but where is it? Time will tell, he said, tapping the wristwatch on his skinny arm. Of course, Arvies would have his own secret place for diamonds. There was also time to leave this place, now that I knew for certain my father would never come back. Arvies and I would slip out of the mine, fetch Grace from the sheds, find Boubacar, and get the 3 stones to the Baron, and then we would leave Marange. We've got to go, Arvies, I said. Tonight. We'll go the way Chippo and Cumber went. I turned away so Arvies could not see the tears in my eyes. So much about the stones had been for my father, to prove to him I could do a man's work, could help look after our family. Finding diamonds had meant my father would be a teacher again, fulfill his dream of seeing Grace and me back in school. The promise of the stones now seemed hollow and meaningless. And then we heard a jeep skid to a stop outside, soldiers barking orders, Commander Jesus yelling. Outside, miners hurriedly dropped their tools, and were herded at gunpoint into lines in front of the tents. We knew we had to join them. Commander Jesus stood over us, 1 foot up on the dashboard of the jeep, scanning the crowd as we shuffled closer. No more campfire singing, quipped Arvies. Commander Jesus' silver lenses zeroed in on me and Arvies, and a flash of fear ran down my spine. I thought we had come to an agreement, his voice boomed. You work my Majuru, and we pay you for what you find. We give you good food, water, medicine, and a dry place to sleep. Yet I find this is not good enough for you. His words were chillingly sarcastic, his voice deadly calm. People run away. They are unpatriotic, disloyal to our president. They are not men, they are traitors. A fearful mumbling went through the crowd. Some miners protested, shook their heads. The bravest ones called out that as they had not run away, they should not be punished. Commander Jesus raised his hand and the men fell silent. I do not punish loyal workers, but some of you have thought of running away. Such thoughts must be reconsidered. He reached down as a soldier handed him the oven glove Cumber had stolen. Almost casually he went on, I have decided to let 1 person go. The mitt flew through the air and landed in the dirt at my feet. Patson, come here. The miners backed slowly away as if I were toxic. Yet Arvi's small hand curled around mine, squeezing it tight. Show him no fear, he whispered. Bullies hate that. Come here, boy, don't be frightened. I know about you and your family, Commander Jesus said pleasantly. An image of a dancing scarlet-lipped wife flashed into my head. You want to leave the mines? You can go. I will not stop you. Confused, I glanced at Arvies. He shook his head. Come closer, boy, said Commander Jesus. I hesitated, and then he jumped down from the jeep to wait for me. When I reached him, he laid a hand on my shoulder, turning me slightly away from the miners, and spoke in a voice only I could hear. Did you like what you saw last night, Patson? Did it turn you on? I was too stunned to answer. I shook my head, not daring to look at him. That's okay. He chuckled, squeezing my shoulder painfully. Sylvia's told me how you like looking at her breasts. I don't blame you. I too was a boy once. He jerked my shoulder, forcing me to look at him, at my terrified face reflected in his mirrored glasses. Commander Jesus turned me around to face the miners, his hands resting lightly on my shoulders. I've decided that this boy can leave my Majuru. We only want men who wish to work here, men who serve our president. You are free to go, boy, he announced, pushing me forward. Run away. I looked desperately at the miners, who were now eyeing me with pity. I spotted Uncle James and Moosey, and they shrank back, eyes on the ground. Arvies met my gaze and forced a smile. I was waiting for the branches with thorns and the soldiers with sticks, but no one moved. I felt pathetic and terrified. I said you can go, insisted Commander Jesus, the same way you left last night. Totally confused, I looked at him again. Now, before I change my mind. I turned towards the gate and saw that a jeep had blocked the road. I walked slowly out of the mine and felt all eyes on my back, my head spinning. I headed out past the barbed wire fence behind the toilets and glanced back at the mine. Nobody had moved. Commander Jesus had climbed back into the jeep and was watching me. "Run!" he shouted, drawing his pistol and firing it twice into the sky. I started jogging across the field, my heart beating in my chest. Was he planning to shoot me as I ran? I picked up my speed, my heart now thumping, my body darting from side to side, making sure not to run in a straight line. I expected the sound of gunfire, bullets hitting the ground around me, until one smashed into my back. I ran harder. No gunshots, no bullets. I was elated with every stride that took me away from the mine. I had managed to escape with my diamonds. I would fetch Grace. We would be free. Then I felt a metallic click under my left foot. There was searing heat and a flash of bright white, a crack of thunder, a cloud of dust. I was airborne. A violent force from within the earth propelled me off the ground. My breath was sucked from me as if I had been splashed with freezing water. My ears stopped working. In slow motion, I saw myself fall back to earth and land on my side with an enormous thud. I tried to get up, but could not. As I looked down, I saw a bloody tangle of white bones where my left foot should have been. The skin of my leg was smouldering. Some distance away lay a running shoe that looked very much like my own. I lay there thinking how strange all this was, until pain roared through me like a blast of furnace wind, blowing away my thoughts and replacing them with an uncontrollable raw scream that went on and on and on. And then I went away. Diamond Boy, Chapter 21. Wake up, Patson. Sunlight, blue sky, a face. Why was Arvy slapping me? He was shouting at me, but I could barely hear him. He lifted my shoulders from the ground. I was upright, dizzy. The world zoomed in from me from every angle. The ground was the sky. The hills were the tents. The soldiers were the miners. Commander Jesus was Uncle James running towards me. I was flying, Arvies, running and then flying. I was gasping for words, wondering why I could not move my legs, why I was so cold when the sun was so hot. "You stepped on a landmine," came a voice from far away. Arvies was dragging me back toward the mine. "The mine is in the land," I said. "No time for jokes now, Arvies. Stay awake, Patson." "My leg hurts," I said, aware I was crying. "There's something wrong with my leg." Many hands were on me now, people shouting, a man with a belt twisting it tightly below my knee, the back of a jeep, hard metal ridges, my head banging against the door handle. That should have hurt, but somehow it did not, the furnace of pain coming from somewhere else. "Careful," someone shouted. "Slow down." "Look at me," Patson shouted Arvies. Now my head was cradled in his lap, and I saw his upside-down face. I was being rocked from side to side inside a cacophony of white noise. Arvies shouting, wind rushing, wheels humming over gravel, the scream of a motor, at times far away, then thundering through me. I wished it could be quiet. I wanted so much to just close my eyes. But Arvies glared at me, his pupils drilling into my own. "I see you, Arvies," I said. "Make them turn off the noise." And somebody did. I awoke with a porcupine staring at me. A black snake rose up with a flame in its mouth, and from nowhere the old woman appeared and handed a jar to someone kneeling behind me on the floor. "Drink, boy, drink," she ordered. The noise was gone. I lay in a balm of quiet shadows, candles flickering. Someone poured a foul-tasting milky liquid into my mouth. Why could I not drink it myself? My arms would not move. I gagged, trying to spit it out, but it was too late. I swallowed, and more words passed over me. "Talk to him, Takai. Tell him what happened. He needs to know everything," said the old woman, forcing something different down my throat. "Keep him awake, long as possible. Talk, boy. Talk to your friend, and hold him still." "Patson, can you hear me?" I nodded, choking down more bitter brew. "You stepped on a landmine. Your leg is badly injured, but Granny can fix you. She has done this before many times, in the Liberation War. She travelled with the soldiers in the bush. They call her Dr. Mooti. Can you hear me?" My leg? It was as if by mentioning my leg out loud, I had roused a sleeping monster with razor-sharp teeth that began feeding on my lower limbs. I heard myself gasp as pain spiked through me. "It was nearly blown off. She needs to clean it." Arvi's voice broke through. "She'll stretch your skin to close the wound, cauterize it to stop the bleeding. You have to stay awake." He prized open my clenched hand and forced something into it. "It's a lion's tooth. It will give you strength." "How did you know?" I asked the old woman. "I never told you about my mother." "You stay awake, boy," said the old woman, sharpening her liver knife beside me. "This is going to hurt. Oh, hold him tight, Takai. Arvies, you take my stones. They're in my shoe. Give the biggest to Grace. You keep the other two." The old woman's knife pierced the monster that had become my leg. It growled as she cut into its flesh, and my body jerked upward, fighting against the sharp blade. I saw the mangled beast then, its swollen stump head wreathed in blood, devouring my leg. The beast roared with pain that ripped through my body, delivering me into blackness. The old woman showed me the oil pot. Why was she cooking my garazis? The anger stone, rain stone, and dream stone were boiling away. They rattled around as she stirred them, steam rising from the pot on the gas stove. She was talking to me, but her words made no sense. They were as obscure as the glass eyes on the porcupine, the flickering of the candle on the animal skull, and the fearful expression on Arvy's face. The old woman took a heavy, red-hot flat iron off the flames. She continued talking but now I could not hear her. I was too scared of the iron, so hot, so close to me. Why did she need to do her ironing now? Seared flesh, burning blood. The monster screamed at the sudden heat. Its jagged teeth tore into my body. I floated away through the ceiling, leaving my body on the floor of the photocopiing room. I watched the old woman pressing the iron against my leg. Arvy's trying desperately to hold down a body that writhed and jerked as it waged a losing battle with a bloodthirsty monster. I did not care any more. Let them get on with it, I thought, and so I left. Familiar voices pulled me back from the darkness. And he knows a doctor in Mutari. My father will help you, Patson. He knows about the Garazis. You give them to him and he will take care of you, get you a new leg. This was Jamu, talking. Grace told me about your diamonds. My dad said he will take you to a hospital. He will get the best doctor there is to make you better. He just has to wait for Commander Jesus to come back to the mine. Jamu's words passed through me. The soldiers say he will be back in a week. Then my dad will ask permission to leave the mine and he will come for you. It won't be long now. My dad will help you, Patson. It will be okay. We're family. You give him the diamonds and he'll get you everything you need. I wish Jamu would stop talking. Does he understand what I'm saying? My head was too heavy to nod. Patson, can you hear me? Where are the diamonds? You told your father about our syndicate? That must be Arvy's. His voice was hard, unfriendly. Does Musi also know? It's over, Arvy's. There's no more Guejana. Chippo and Kamba are gone. It's just you and me. You told them about our Guejana syndicate. You told your father everything. I had to, Arvy's. I had to. Jamu sounded frightened. Things have changed. You have to understand. The soldiers are in control now. We have to be clever to get any diamonds past them. My father told me to come here. We've got to help Patson. My father promised to help him. Yeah, I'm sure he will, said Arvy's, just like he helped me when I was sick. Why was Arvy so angry? I tried opening my eyes, but my eyelids seemed glued closed. I forced them open, peering with difficulty into the shadows, and saw only the shape of Jamu's mouth, crooked in his round and sweating face. Why was he sweating? Had he been running? His eyes glistened in the candlelight, darting around the room, searching. I could not see Arvy's, but his hands rested light and cool on my shoulders, and always the pain that kept my brain from fully understanding. Give them the diamonds, I muttered. I don't care about them. I do not know if anyone heard me. Jamu was no longer there. The room was lighter. More words floated in the air. Ho ho. Now trouble makes more trouble. The old lady's face appeared out of the shadows. Jars and potions flew off the shelf and were stuffed into a canvas bag. Storm's coming now. When one knows, they all know. Ho ho. Big trouble now. Quick, Takai, move. Ho ho. We have much to do. A diary entry. Who cares where I am or what day it is? Why? That's all I want to know. Why did this happen? Somewhere in the room the old woman snores. Arvi sleeps. I am awake alone in the night, and darkness presses down on me. My thoughts feeding on themselves. A single candle is all that keeps me from crawling out of this room, and into the yard, and into the bush, and into a hole to curl up and die, and let this sentence never end, because if it does, I will end up crying and crying until my insides turn into slush, and I don't know why I want to write in my diary when I can't understand why this is happening to me, and the candle flickers and reminds me of people and warmth and light, and now I have to find a place for a full stop because my hand aches as I write this, and so it has to be somewhere round about now. Baba, help me. God, help me. I think I'm dying. Please, let it be the end.